kind of Hebrew that we find in the Book of Esther and how it is different than the kind of Hebrew that we find in other books of the Bible or in the classical books of the Bible, such as Genesis, Exodus, Samuel. Okay, and many of you are already familiar with the concept of different periods of Hebrew, meaning different type of Hebrew, which makes perfect sense because every language works like that. I also want to remind you that if you don't remember all of that concept of the periodization of the Hebrew, on my website, where I think most of you have have access to this course of Become a Hebrew Reader. There is a section of Introduction to Become a Hebrew Reader, and in that section there is a lesson about the periodization of the Hebrew. Okay, where we're talking about exactly these questions: how the Hebrew, how do we divide the Hebrew into different periods? We're not getting into the nitty-gritty of what it means and what are the characteristics of each of these periods of the Hebrew. But again, I said there's not going to be a lot of. So here you can see, I'm just browsing through this video that details the different periods of the Hebrew and focusing obviously on what we know as biblical Hebrew or classical Hebrew. And specifically classical Hebrew oftentimes refers to what we would call First Temple period Hebrew. Today, we're going to talk about something else, and that is late biblical Hebrew as reflected in the Book of Esther. Okay, and again, periodization of languages, and Hebrew is no exception for that matter, is something you know from life, guys. Think of your grandparents. Did they have exactly the same English you have? Maybe slightly different, especially if you compare the English of your grandparents with that of your grandkids, okay, or children, okay? And that comparison makes it even more striking to see the differences between your grandparents and your grandkids. And again, we're talking about English. Same applies for every language. Same applies to biblical Hebrew. Should be said that there is a bit of a difference because we're dealing with a text, not speech. Spoken language tends to be more flexible and more easily influenced than writing, okay? And the written language tends to be more unified and less distinctive across different speakers and across different dialects. Think of the last time you had to listen to someone from Scotland speaking, okay? It might not be as easy to listen and understand, but it's very easy to read an email sent to you by someone from Scotland. No problem. Okay, so that's a little bit about the difference between written language and spoken language. However, we still have some ways to look at a written language and kind of see the influences, see what helped shape a certain dialect over a certain period, which we would call a chronolect, or a certain area, a geographic dialect, or a social dialect, and so forth. Specifically today, we're going to talk about the Hebrew in the Book of Esther, which, since the Book of Esther is written during the Second Temple period, it describes the reality of the Second Temple period already, okay? And that makes it late biblical Hebrew. in comparison to classical biblical Hebrew or standard biblical Hebrew of the First Temple period, definitely in comparison to what we would call archaic biblical Hebrew, the Hebrew of the earliest parts of the written tradition that we have in the Bible. So that's late biblical Hebrew, and the language of the Book of Esther demonstrates how the Hebrew evolved in the period of the Book of Esther, and how we have influences that are related to the historical circumstances, such as foreign influence, not surprisingly, Persian foreign influence. Okay? And it is a linguistic connection or link in that chain that we call Hebrew. Okay, so we have archaic biblical Hebrew, standard biblical Hebrew, or classical biblical Hebrew. Then we have sometimes what is referred to as transitional biblical Hebrew, and then late biblical Hebrew. Okay, and let's start with late biblical Hebrew. I think that we've already said that late biblical Hebrew is what we find in the Second Temple period, which means after the Babylonian exile and before the canonization of the Hebrew Bible. Okay, different than the classical biblical Hebrew, the Hebrew of the First Temple period, as we said, we have certain linguistic features. Again, we'll focus on seeing these features in the Book of Esther. So we'll see Persian and Aramaic influence. We'll see grammatical, morphological, syntactical developments. We'll even talk about the passive verbs and even a unique passive construction that is directly taken from Persian syntax, which will clarify something that I'm sure you asked yourselves every time you read the Book of Esther. And I don't know how about all of you, but I know Maureen read the Book of Esther many times. Right, Maureen? Listened to it at least once a year, right? You finished.
Probably more than that.
Right.
I'm busy. I've got a CD player that plays a disc for me every night.
Very
get
good.
through the whole lot 6 times a year.
6 times a year, which means that if you're around 40 years old, you've already listened to it 240 times at least. So I'm sure that in one of these,
quite that.
not quite. Okay, so I remember when my grandmother was celebrating her 80-something birthday, I said to her, "Congratulations, Mazal Tov, Grandma, you're 20-something." She said, "Yes, the 4th time I'm 20-something." Right. Anyway, guys, so it will even help us answer a question that I'm sure anyone who read the Book of Esther asked themselves about the story. And I don't know many that actually know the answer, because the answer is related to the influence of Persian syntax over biblical Hebrew, because there is a sentence there where if you read it according to standard biblical Hebrew syntax, it's very difficult to understand because it makes very little sense, and we'll get to it. That's just the idea. So late biblical Hebrew in the Book of Esther specifically, the Book of Esther, as we said, was written during the Persian period alongside other biblical books, Ezra, Nehemiah, Chronicles, and we have, understandably, influence of Persian rule. The Book of Esther is ample, has ample examples for the influence of Persian culture, Persian language, Persian court. So we'll talk about that, Pitgam, Achashdar Penin, and so forth. Aramaic influence, because Aramaic is much more influential in Second Temple period in general, and also the official language of the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire used Aramaic as their official language. We'll get to that. Morphological shift, changes in the form of words, and also what would later on become similar elements that are similar to what later on will become the what we call Rabbinic Hebrew. Now, it's not so easy though to identify all of these. Why? Because of what we call pseudo-classicism. What is pseudo-classicism? Like everything that starts with pseudo means false. As you know, in Greek, pseudo, I am telling a lie. That's I'm fibbing. I'm saying something that is false. That's the verb. So pseudonym is the false name of someone. Okay? Pseudo epigraphy is something that is falsely written on behalf of someone, that is as if I'm writing a book, but I'm saying that book was written by King Solomon. Okay, that's pseudepigrapha. Okay, and I'm sure you have other examples in English. Okay, off the top of anyone's head, guys, more examples for pseudo.
Pseudoscience.
Pseudoscience, right? Combining Greek and Latin, that's already bad, right? Pseudo and science, right? Many interesting words kind of combine Greek and Latin. Okay, so pseudoscience is one example. Any more? Gary, I see you unmuted.
Well, I was thinking more of the form, like the word today used to have a hyphen in it. That's, would you call that morphological or what?
Hyphen is not like, you can talk about the fact that I don't know, that maybe would be morphosyntactic, or it would be maybe related to the way morphology is done. So yeah, why not? You know, to make two words into one. When do you make it German? Like when they can go all the way and take 5-6 words and turn them into one word.
Oh.
Yeah, right. I remember when I studied German, everyone was crying around me, and I said, "That's bad. Last year I took Greek. Don't worry, that's not." Since I came to German after Greek, I was already immune. So, right. So we talked about pseudoscience, pseudonyms, pseudoepigraphy, pseudo-classicism. Pseudo-classicism is the intentional imitation of classical biblical Hebrew. Why? Because if I am Esther, or I am whoever is writing the Book of Esther, I'm not writing it like I'm writing my notes. I'm writing it in the best form possible. What is the best form? What is the model form for biblical literature? That's the biblical Hebrew. So I will make an attempt to write whatever I'm writing in light of the classical tradition of Hebrew writing, which is the books of Genesis, Exodus, the Pentateuch in general, Joshua, Samuel. This is how you write for the ages. So that's an intentional attempt to write in a classical way. So that's pseudo-classicism. By the way, we can see it around ourselves as well. If someone is writing poetry and is using like Shakespearean forms, he's not Shakespeare. He's not living 400 years in the past, but he's writing like what would be considered classics. We've seen it, a very, very good example for that with our discussion about the Yehoash inscription, right? Because when you forge something, you're making, and you want to write it in classical Hebrew, that's pseudo-classicism. That was an attempt by whoever forged that inscription to write in a way that would be exactly like First Temple period Hebrew. Okay. Luckily, no one is perfect. That is to say, we can find those influences even when someone is trying to hide them, if they are trying to hide them, you know. So sometimes writers of late biblical Hebrew were trying to write like First Temple period Hebrew, but nonetheless, okay, if you look closely, you see the difference. Okay. Sometimes it can complicate the dating of a biblical text, okay, because a passage that is written during the Second Temple period may be more difficult to identify as such because of pseudo-classicism. It requires of us, basically, it requires anyone who is dealing with the text to be very good detectives. Okay, so that's, to understand the language, not just in the basic level of it, but go deep and see if there are any inconsistencies. And if so, are these inconsistencies with classical Hebrew can be explained, can be better understood in light of a later period of the writer who is already influenced by other things. Are you with me, guys? Very good.
We're
Yeah.
listening.
Very good. Okay. So let's move on to maybe the most interesting thing about the Book of Esther, and the most unique about the language of the Book of Esther. And that is Persian loanwords. One has to remember that the Book of Esther is distinctively ample with the Persian, because it's written in the Persian court, or it describes a story that happens in the Persian court. And as such, we have many Persian terms reflecting the Persian period. There is also another advantage, so to speak, to finding Persian words in a biblical text. Prior to the Persian period, which starts with the Persians defeating the Babylonians, essentially, and kind of inheriting Israel in that region, we don't have a direct contact between the Hebrew culture and the Persian culture. So unlike Aramaic, which has a connection to the Hebrew throughout the biblical period, from a very early age all the way to the latest age, and we can find Aramaic influence in different chronolects of biblical Hebrew. When we talk about Persian words, that's kind of almost automatically gives us a timestamp. You see, Persian word, okay, that's already late. In the case of the Book of Esther, there is no question, because it's not even trying to say it's early. Sometimes in the writing, one could try and do that, but the Book of Esther is straightforward about it, though it's in some cases trying to write as if it is early as far as the language. Yes, Ron.
I'm looking at that word for satrap. What's that? Akash Darpan, is that related to the king's name in the sense of the leadership? The first part of that, Ahasuerus?
Okay. So essentially, we'll get to the word Achashdarpan. Specifically, we have a slide about that word, and so we'll discuss the etymology of that word as well. Okay.
Okay.
But
Very
it's a good question, and it's very interesting to see these questions. It is related phonetically, and I'll explain why down the road. Okay. So we've talked about the Persian words. Now, understandably, because we're talking about the Persian court, not just Persia, but the Persian court, we have a lot of words that are related to the court. Okay. Okay. So that's the name, the terminology that we come across in the Book of Esther. A few examples here: Dat, Pidgam, Achashdarpan. Achashdarpan. We'll get to these, and Aramaic also. Sometimes we forget, but the Aramaic, which was not the native language of the Persians, was nonetheless their official language of choice for running their kingdom. Now, this may come as a surprise because they had a language, okay? Nonetheless, even though they had their own language, they chose to use the Aramaic as the language with which they ran their empire in the Middle East. Why is that, guys? Anyone knows?
Would it have been the earlier Babylonian influence? It was the language of the people in the region already.
Okay. So basically, the this tradition probably goes not just to the Babylonians, but to the Assyrians. And how do I know that? If you are gonna join me in less than 2 weeks, in 12 days, in the British Museum, you'll also be able to see, guys, that in the Lachish reliefs, those reliefs that were made on the walls of the palace in Nineveh, celebrating Sennacherib's achievements in Judea, he has two scribes next to him. One is holding a tablet and writing on it with a stylus, and the other one is holding a scroll and writing upon it with a quail, which means the Assyrians already started to use a different language than their own to run this part of the empire, or at least alongside that. By the way, traditionally, the writing that was used by them for the Aramaic, which is the writing that you know for Hebrew, is oftentimes referred to as Ktav Ashuri, Assyrian script, even though it wasn't for Assyrian. So that's the Aramaic, and how Aramaic influence is also related to the Persian Empire. Okay, so that's that, and let's start with the different Persian words. Okay, and this is a fascinating word. Let's read this word, this verse, guys. Let's see. Let's see. Anyone who wants to read, raise your hands. Yes, Gary. Go ahead.
Vayomer Hamelach Lachachamim Yodea Ha'itim Kiken Devar Hamelach Lifnei Kol Yodea Dat Vadim. Then the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for it was the custom of the king so to speak before all who knew law and justice.
Right. So, what is the word dat here? The word dat.
Well,
Ooh,
Decree. Law. Yes, you wrote it was law before.
Right. Dat is law. Does it remind you any word in English?
data.
Data.
Yeah, data that you've written
Right.
there.
Remember, Persian is an Indo-Iranian language, like the Indo-European languages of Europe. So the word dat, datum, in Latin, data, datum, is what is given. Okay? And in the Book of Esther, we also see Vehadat nitena b'Shushan Abira. And the law, the decree was given. That is what is given. That is the law. The law is given. Okay? And the word that we actually find in many names. Okay? So I didn't bring that, but you can open the list, okay, of the 10 sons of Haman that were hung on the tree, okay? And let me show you, because it's nice to see how it is written in a scroll, in a Torah scroll. The 10 sons of Haman are written in a special form. So we read them in one, we don't breathe between different names. We have 10 names, and I want to kind of ask you, can you find places here or names here that have that component of dat or data in these names?
I made some homework. I found Parshan data.
Very good, Parshan data. So we have data
And Aridata.
and aridata. Very good. So we have Parshan data and aridata. Anyone remembers what was the name of Haman's father?
Long before Agag.
Yeah, he was an Agagite, you're right. So he comes from that line of Agag, the king of Amalek. We've talked about Amalek last week. Right? But anyone remembers the name of the father?
Hamadatha?
Hamedata, right. So again, we find that data in the name of his father and in the name of two of his sons. We said that the data is the law, the what is given. Okay, so Parshan data is he who was maybe a beautiful law, something that is again, the etymology of these names is sometimes either a law or was given, maybe that which was given to someone beautiful, okay, as the child was given to him. So that's Parshan data. And we also had, right, we've talked about aridata. What did we say about Persian? It's an Indo-Iranian language. What is Iran? Anyone knows why Iran is called Iran?
It's from the Aryan race.
Right, because it's the Aryaname. It's the land of the Aryans. And Aridata is maybe that which was given from that god Ari, or maybe that which comes is given from the Aryan race, or Aryan law, but it is related to Aryan, okay, and data, Ari data. Yes, Frank.
Yes, now were they descendant from Elam?
So the Elam, Ashur, and Arpachshad are what are described as the children of Shem, okay, part of the Semitic family. The Elamites are definitely in the area, but I'm not sure that they are from that region. Maybe basically they come from India, or an area of India. Even the swastika, by the way, is something that comes from that culture of India, okay, and later on became a symbol of the Aryans, or those who assumed for themselves that Aryan tradition, even though I'm not sure they are at all connected to it genetically, genealogy wise. Yes, Ron?
Yeah, I always thought that the Iranians were Indo-Europeans who descended from Japheth.
So yeah, that's what I said. The people in Europe are
Okay.
generally,
Mhm.
viewed as I said, the Elamites are,
Oh.
according to the tradition, Semitic. So these are the 10 children of Aman, and we've talked about Aridata, and we've talked about Parshandata. How about some, by the way, also make the connection to Aspata, saying that this is the short version of Aspadata. Okay. And there are other suggestions. Again, the father of Ahiman is Hamdata. What is Ham in Hamdata? Good question.
Other than the son of Noah?
No, that's Ham. That's
Okay.
correct. Nice idea. But Hamdata, it's actually something that you know from many English words. Okay, remember that the Greek is also Indo-European, and so we find some similarities. So Hamdata, Ham is equal or similar. We know that from English as well. We use the word homosexual to talk about people of the same sex. Okay, so Hamdata, same law. Okay, so that's Hamdata, which takes us to Haman. How about Haman? Is it related to similarity as well? Possibly. The word how or who may also mean good. Good in Persian. But what is man? What is man? What is man? It's kind of a pun in Aramaic, because man is what, right? In the Bible, we see that when the people of Israel see the manna, they say manhu.
What is it?
What is it? Because they didn't know. What is it? Okay, but I want to ask you I want to suggest a different etymology. The word man or mana has to do with thinking. How do you call the legal term for premeditation?
Manslaughter.
Yeah, that's manslaughter when you when you premeditate murder. But when you have that notion that you want to do it intentionally in legal term, comes from Latin.
Premonition.
No.
No, I used to know that term. Oh,
Premeditated.
Yeah, but how do you say it? What do you have to prove as far as the law in
is that
America?
menses? Could it be menses?
Close.
Intention, but
Yeah, but how do you call that term in English, in legal term? You know that the
corpus something.
come again? Compos mentis is the ability, is not the intention.
Okay.
Applauding.
Okay, but
Premeditated.
yes, but the intention and the knowledge that you're doing something bad has a Latin term that is used in legal jargon in English. You know that in Israel, when a lawyer wants to sound smart, they use a little bit of Aramaic in their Aramaic terminology. In English, they use Latin, right? When they want to say
Is it four menses or
no, it's called mens rea.
mens rea? Okay.
Okay.
And rea means thing.
Right. Mens rea means that someone has a bad intention, a bad thought, right? The thought is mens in Latin. Ha man or human means good thought. Okay, good thinking, good thought, good idea. And the Book of Esther tells us that, you know, God dealt away with the evil thought that Haman had against the Jews. Okay? And literally, it shows you that this pun that is done by the writer of the Book of Esther shows that he knew the meaning of that name. So when Esther, near the end of the book, in chapter 9, I don't know that I brought this verse. I didn't bring that verse, but the verse says that, you know, the evil thought of Haman against the Jews, and how with this decree, with this letter, his evil thought will go back to him. Okay, went to him, and they hung him and his sons on the tree. That's Esther 9:25. Okay, the wicked thought, the wicked machashavto hara'ah, which is the opposite of the meaning of his name. So again, in order to understand, you have to kind of have that background of understanding the context and understanding the Persian. Again, unfortunately, I don't know Persian. But a little bit, you know, we all speak English, so we know a little bit of Persian because of the similarities. By the way,
like paradise.
Like paradise, right, which I didn't bring into today's discussion. Why? It's a very good example for Persian words in late biblical Hebrew, but specifically it's absent from the Book of Esther.
Right.
We do have a term that reflects that paradise in the Book of Esther, but not the word itself, so I did not bring it. I was debating with myself, but I didn't bring it. Okay, so that's the word dat a little bit and its influence. Anyone knows what dat means in modern Hebrew?
Law.
Come again?
Law.
Law. No. In modern Hebrew, dat means
Knowledge. Does it have to do with that?
It means religion.
Hmm.
Religion. Yeah. If you're a religious person, you are dati. Dati. When I walk around the street, people see that I have a yarmulke, I have a kippah. They say, who? Dati. He is a religious person. That's the regular word for religion and religious, dat and dati. Nobody knows it means law in biblical Hebrew. Of course, people who know the Bible well, they do know that. But generally speaking, if you ask Rabbi Google, what's the Hebrew word for religion? Rabbi Google will tell you it's dat. Or today, Rabbi GPT, or whichever rabbi you hold. Okay?
Rabbi Grok.
Rabbi Grok, right. You don't want to get too much PC, so you go for Rabbi Grok. Okay. Okay. Very good. So that's a little bit about the word dat, which is a fascinating word. Modern Hebrew, as I said, religion. Yes, Frank.
Yes, is it true? I mean, I've heard this, but I don't know that there is actually no word in the all the way up through the late biblical Hebrew actually for what we call religion today. The word simply does not exist pretty much in Tanakh.
Right. Not that I can think of. No, and you've got you don't have that concept. That not that I can think of a word for religion. You can call upon, there are terms that designates one's affiliation with a deity, but not religion in the same way that we use it. Okay, there is a way to say, I worship this God, you worship that God. But there is no term for religious or non-religious. Remember that up until quite recently, historically speaking, there was no such a thing as non-religious. If you were a Christian, you were a Christian. If you were Muslim, you were Muslim. If you were a Jew, you were a Jew. Okay, you could have been like more devout, less devout, but there was no such a thing as someone, at least, again, I don't know about the East, anything, the Far East and their religions, but as far as the like monotheistic religions, the concept of secularism and non-religiosity is fairly recent. Take Spinoza, okay, even it's not something that you can trace back to the biblical times.
Well, in these times, you hear people say, imagine dot.
Right. Imagine that, right? But that's a little bit about this word. Pitgam. So Pitgam is another Persian word. Let's read this verse. Go ahead, Rosalind.
ונשמע פתגם המלך אשר יעשה בכל מלכותו כי רבה היא, וכל הנשים ייתנו יקר לבעליהם למגדול ועד קטן. And when the king's edict which he shall make is heard throughout all his kingdom, great as it is, then all women will give honor to their husbands, great and small.
Right. Again, What's are you what's going on in Canada?
Oh, lots.
I hope you're not charging 25% more from the guys for reading or something. Okay. Anyway, so Pitgam Hamelech, the word that comes forth from the king, which is Patgam or Pitgam, edict, decree. Okay. Pitgam Hamelech, again, only in the Persian context, only in the later books. We find it in other late biblical Hebrew books, such as Ezra, which again is explicitly late, so there is no question. Now, what do we do when we find it in a book that is whose dating is not as explicit as in the Book of Esther? So the Book of Esther is not trying to say, listen, I am early. The Book of Ezra, the Book of Daniel, all of these are, they're late. They admit to be late. But what do we do if we have a word such as Pitgam appearing in a different book, such as the Book of Ecclesiastes? Okay. It is already okay. So now maybe we have this linguistic tool that can help us date other books. Okay, and the example is not just, it's a true example. It appears in Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 11. Does it mean that everything in the book of Ecclesiastes must have been written in the Second Temple period? No. Doesn't mean, but certainly it's something to consider. Yes, Ron.
Is there a possibility that it could have been, let's take a copy of an earlier book, but the copy is using more modern languages?
Sure. Yeah, there is certainly a possibility like that. Listen, I have copies of the Bible in my house that are newer than some of the copies of Harry Potter that I have in my house. Doesn't mean that Harry Potter was written before the Bible. Okay? Okay. Very good. So, yes, very good. We've talked about Pitgam. Again, another and again, term. Both of these are related to administration. Achashdar panim. Okay, let's read this verse, and I'll explain the phonetic connection that we've talked about to Achashverosh, but not the etymological one. So let's see this verse. Ron, did you read already today?
No, I haven't read yet.
So go
Not yet.
ahead. Since you asked
Okay.
about Achashverosh.
Yeah. That Vayik that Vayik Vayiku Vayikru
No, Vayikareu.
Vayikareku. Thank you. Vayikareku.
Vayikareu. This is a nifal. Vayikareu.
Vayikareu. Sofere Hamelech Bachodesh Harishon
Harishon.
Bish. Oh, that's Bishlosha Asar Yom. It's hard to see. There's kind of my old eyes here. Is that Yom? Okay, is that Bo?
מ-13 יום בו. Right.
Oh, thank you. Vay, 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 vayakat, vayakatev, kik, kikhal, asher, uh, is that zit? Oh, what is that? Zit.
ציווה.
Oh, ziva, ziva. I'm trying to see this U sound. It's not there. Ziva, uh, Haman.
Right. This is simply a dagesh because it's a
Right.
yel.
It's not the vowel. Right. Okay.
Right.
Haman. Al Akash Akash Dar Akash Dar Akash Darb Akash Darb Nay
Right.
Hab Melech the El Hapa Hot Asher Al Medina Di Dina V'el Sharei
Sarei.
Sarei, that's enough shah. Sarei, thank you. Va Medina Rina Ka is that Kaheta Kahetava
ככתבה.
Kichava the that's closed there. Kil Shona
כלשונו.
Kilshono, thank you. Kilshono Bishem Hamelech Akash oh, that's a king. Akash Veros Nick Tav Vanek Tam Bita Ba'at Hamelech. Oh,
Right. And English, please.
English. Okay, I don't see it there. Let's see.
How about now? Do you see it now?
Yeah, I see it now. Then the king's scribes, I'm about to translate it by heart, but I know all those words. Then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and it was written just as Haman commanded the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, and to the princes of each people, each province according to his script, each people according to his language, being written in the name of King Ahasuerus or Ahasuerus, and sealed with the king's signet ring.
Right. So first of all, we have the word Achash Darpan or Achash Darpanim or Achash Darpenei Hamelech here in the masculine plural construct form. First of all, you can see the morphological assimilation of this word. We are taking the word from Persian, but now we're adding a morphological ending. We're adding an ending that is Hebrew. Okay, the A at the end of the word, which you know is completely Hebrew morphology. Think of Anglicized cases where we add something that is already morphological to the word. Let's take a word that is taken from a different language in English. Pizza. Okay, pizzas. I'm adding a suffix that marks the plural, the plurality in English, to a word that is not English originally. Or hamburgers. Okay, these are words that are not English originally, but once they're anglicized, once they immerse in the English language, once they're accepted into the language, one of the things that show the acceptance of a word from a foreign source and its assimilation into the language is the fact that we start using the target language morphology with that language. Okay? Are you with me, guys? I want to hear your examples for a word that is taken from a different language, and now you add something morphological of the target language. So we've seen it with achashdar penei. We add the tzere yod, which marks the masculine plural construct form in Hebrew, to say some things of. It's not the satrap, achashdar pan. It's the achashdar panim. That would be the plural, which we do have in biblical Hebrew. Again, the plural, the plurality, the morpheme for the plural is added at the end. And here, because it's a construct form, achashdar penei hamelech. Let's hear your example, guys, for something like that in English or Hebrew or any other language you want.
Shabbat instead
Okay,
of
very good. So we take the word Shabbat. I'm gonna do a couple of Shabbats in New York. Okay, that's something sounds normal, right? Very good.
Shabbaton.
Come again?
Shabbaton.
Shabbaton.
Yeah.
Shabbaton. I'll take what you said and I'll maybe in English you would say a sabbatical. So you're taking the word Shabbat and you first of all changed the phonetics because now you say Sabbath, not Shabbat, and then a sabbatical. You kind of used again morphology that is not Hebrew with that word. So sabbatical maybe, or you can think of not just Hebrew words in English. Whichever word you have, from a different language, and it happens, I'm sure, in whichever language you speak. Okay, so that's a nice, interesting morphological phenomenon to see with this word. Now, the word achashdar penin or achashdar pan comes from the Persian chashtrapavan, which is the protector of the realm or the protector of the province. You asked about the connection to Achashverosh, right? Ron.
Yes.
Okay. So both these words have something in common, yet not the etymology. The meaning of the word Achashverosh is probably related to being a male king or king male. Okay. When ch means king. By the way, this word probably made its way to a Persian word or a Persian word you all know. I promise you know this Persian word.
Ah,
The only one I know is Ayatollah.
No. Yeah, very good. The word Shah.
Shah. Oh, yeah.
By the way, Ayatollah is a word you also understand because you know Hebrew. What is Ayatollah? Ayatollah Khomeini or Khamenei. What does it mean to be Ayatollah? Guys, you all know what Ayatollah means. You just don't know you know it.
Gotta break it apart basically first.
Right. So Ayat Olah. Olah means Allah. God, like El.
Okay.
Elohim.
So something of God.
Something of God. Ayat. 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 What is the Hebrew word? Ot.
A sign.
A sign from God. Ayatollah. Ayatollah. Guys, too much. By the end of this lecture, someone would maybe, report me as working with Iranian. Ayatollah. So guys.
That's the irony, Natano.
Right.
A bunch of Christians and Jews together talk about the Iranians.
Right. By the way, yeah, the Iranians are, we don't have a problem with the Iranian people.
Mm-hmm.
The truth be told, we don't have a problem with the Iranian people. We have a problem with the regime, but the people, you know that up until 1979, they were good friends of Israel, and I think a very large part of the population in Iran would love to see a day where it can again be friends with Israel. Okay, so that's a bit about Ayatollah, but Ayatollah you brought, Ron. Okay, yeah, and Frank was correct. The word chsha at the beginning of Achashverosh is probably the word shah today. Kind of sometimes you have a metathesis, you have a changing of the order of consonant. Think of a word such as ask, and how many English speakers sometimes say axe.
Too many.
That's all. I'm trying to be descriptive rather than prescriptive or judgmental about it. But listen, I have less of an emotional reaction because I'm not an English speaker.
Yeah, my grandmother was a teacher. I'm sorry.
Me, I'm looking at it as it's not my problem. Yes, or Celis.
What does the word Medina mean? It sounds like city in Arabic, but it's not.
City in Arabic. You're right. So let's take the word Medina that is mentioned here, and let's dive into it. I wasn't planning on, but I cannot avoid a question from Marcellus. Come on. So Medina, you see the root of Medina. It appears four times here. What is the root of Medina?
From Dinah?
Not from. The mem here is just it's not a preposition.
Oh.
But the root indeed is daled yod nun. What does it mean? We had it earlier today. We had yod a dat vadin.
It's a law.
Deen is religion in Arabic, right?
Deen is religion in Arabic, right? Very good. The word deen means law, justice, religion, set of rules, right? Medina, in the deep sense of it, means an area where the same deen, the same law, applies. In English, we would call that a jurisdiction. Now, jurisdiction could be of a city, of a province, of a state, of a federation, essentially. So, for instance, in Arabic, Medina means a city. And specifically, the city of, you might have heard the name, the city of Medina. You've heard that the two most important places to Islam, or three, the two are Mecca and Medina, right? Medina, Mecca is the name of the city, Mecca, and Medina is a short for Madinat an-Nabi, the city of the prophet. The name of the place is Yathrib. It has a name, but it became to be known as the city of the prophet, because Muhammad immigrated to that city in the year 622. So Mecca and Medina means city. In biblical Hebrew, it means province. But again, the same logic. the same jurisdiction. And in modern Hebrew, how do you call the state of Israel in modern Hebrew? Anyone knows?
Medinat Israel.
Medinat Yisrael. You are right. The state of Israel. So in modern Hebrew, Medina means state. In biblical Hebrew, again, more common, simply late biblical Hebrew word. Late biblical Hebrew. That's modern Hebrew. Contemporary Hebrew means a state. Okay. And in Arabic, it means city. But nonetheless, you see that the same logic applies to all of these. Okay, are you with me, guys? Rosellis, are you with me?
Yes, I am.
Right. So we've talked about
Toda.
yeah, Afwan. I don't know how good is your yeah. Did you take Arabic in the military or?
I just picked it up from hanging around guys that took classes around here.
Very good. So essentially Afwan would be like you're
Shukran,
welcome.
Afwan.
Shukran would be thank you, right? Shukran jaziran, shukran ktir. And the answer Afwan. Okay. Very good. So we've talked here about oh, now I do owe Ron an answer about the wood. So it's not related etymologically because Achashverosh, as we said, is male king, and Chashtra Pawan means the protectors of the realm, not the same word. But, or however, both words in their original Persian start with ch, ch. Now, Hebrew does not like consonant cluster, especially not at the beginning of words. So in both cases, we see a phonetic phenomenon that helps these two words kind of dive into the Hebrew. This is called prosthetic aleph. Okay? Prosthetic aleph is an aleph we add at the beginning of a word to make it more palatable, to make it more pronounceable for languages that tend to have a problem with a consonant cluster at the beginning of words. So let's see examples that we can think of. I can give you examples from many examples from Hebrew, but let's see if we have something in English. We don't have that problem, so we say stadium, but in Hebrew, itztadion. Let's see if we have something similar in English. No, I don't have a good example in English because English doesn't have a problem starting with a consonant cluster. But essentially, some languages which do have that problem add an aleph at the beginning to kind of break that consonant cluster. So Achashverosh rather than ch. Okay. Achashdar panim rather than chtr. Okay. So they don't have an etymological connection, but they have a phonetic phenomenon that happens in both of these. Yes, Ron.
The only one I could think of in English would be, it was not quite the same, where you have two consonants together, but they silence one, like the word psychology. You know.
That's a different phenomenon. Okay.
Yeah. But not pronouncing the first consonant.
We had that with pseudo earlier today.
Pseudo
whenever you
mnemonic.
Have at the beginning, like the Book of Psalm. Right. So psychology, pseudepigraphy, right? Pseudo-Classicism, and you've mentioned
pneumatic,
right?
Sorry,
so
yeah.
That's the silent P at the beginning of these words.
There's also mnemonic.
Right.
You said?
Mnemonic, that's right.
Mnemonic. Oh, yeah.
Amen, yeah.
Yeah, mnemonic.
Just take it out altogether.
Yeah, in the Greek, no problem. Pneuma, okay? Psalmos, But in the English, we don't hear that P at the beginning, the silent P. Right. But I'm looking for something else, something that shows the adding of a prosthetic sound at the beginning of the word. Yes, Frank?
I seem to remember, it's a long time ago, a chemical that is in our saliva, in our mouth, that helps us digest starches. And if I remember correctly, that was, we just call it talin, but it's actually spelled P-T-A-L-I-N.
Yeah, same idea. Okay. But I'm looking for something else. So I'm looking for a sound that is added, an aleph that is added. Okay.
In
again,
Spanish, we have examples.
oh, you have it in Spanish. So
I don't know.
a stadium, how would be a stadium in Spanish?
We would have an added consonant, which would be the I, estadio.
Estadio, again, the aleph, the same as the Hebrew. Estadio. Do you have something similar to stomach in Spanish?
Estómago.
Estómago, okay. You see the idea.
Study would be estudio. Yes, so we
Right,
have
very good. You see the idea. Same thing that happens in Spanish happens in Hebrew, and happens with the insertion of these two Persian words into biblical Hebrew.
Is that
Yes,
function of age? I'm sorry.
Frank?
Yes, no, is this a glide? You've
No,
talked
that's
about
not
this
a glide.
before?
The glide is something else.
Okay.
But it's not unlike a glide in the idea that it facilitates kind of it's a phonetic phenomenon.
Yes,
This aleph
that's why I was asking.
Yeah, so very good. Thank you for the Spanish example, and I'm sure that there are many examples like that. Another important word people forget is Persian originally, probably, or Iranian, is the word, very, very essential word in post-biblical Hebrew, exists already in the Bible, but only in late biblical Hebrew, and that's the word zeman. Okay, zeman, time in modern Hebrew, time. That's the regular Hebrew word for time, modern Hebrew. Biblical Hebrew, appointed time. Let's see this verse. Guys, go ahead. Frank, did you read already?
No, I have not. No.
Go, please.
Okay. Kiyemu. Bekibel.
Vekibelu.
Bekibel. Oh boy. Bekibelu. Bekibelu. Thank you. Hayehudim. Alehem. Al Zaram. Be'ai. No, I'm sorry. Baal. Kol Hanilvim. Alehem.
Right.
Velo Ya'avor.
Velo yavor. Right.
Liot Osim. Et Shnei Hayamin Ha'ele Hitavam Vehit Manam
Bechizmanam.
Vehit Manam
Bechizmanam.
Vehiz Manam. I'm sorry. Okay, I got it now. Vehiz Manam Bechol Shana Beshana. Okay. The Jews established and made a custom for themselves and for their descendants, and for all those who allied themselves with them, so that they should not fail to celebrate these 2 days according to their regulation and according to their appointed time annually.
Right. So the word zeman, late biblical Hebrew, somewhat similar to the, not always, but somewhat similar to the Hebrew mo'ed in classical biblical Hebrew. Not always, some overlapping between the two words, but again, as an alternative in First Temple period. And that's the word zeman, which is again influenced by the Persian and appears only in late biblical Hebrew. For your information, there are certain, certain important books that are relevant when talking about late biblical Hebrew. First of all, a concise lexicon of late biblical Hebrew by Avi Horowitz, and also we have the contribution of Lior Gottlieb there and others. So that's important. Also relevant in this context is the book of non-Semitic loanwords in the Hebrew Bible. If you remember, we had Professor Benjamin J. Noonan for a conversation a few years ago about his book, Non-Semitic Loanwords in Biblical Hebrew, both of which are very important when talking about these types of words, both as far as the methodology and the information that can be found in these books concerning these matters. So that's again from the Book of Esther. I promised, or I mentioned in the beginning of today's discussion, how sometimes, or this verse, there is a verse in the Book of Esther that is, I think, misunderstood by the overwhelming of the people who read this verse. And I also had difficulties with it, and with it, the common interpretation of this verse. And a few years ago, I heard a lecture about the Persian background of the Book of Esther, and it made it that much more clear. Rosalind, did you have a question? Do you have a question? I saw your hand.
Yes, but it was previous. You say Zaman isn't a Hebrew word.
No, I did not. I said the origin of it is not Hebrew.
Okay, so we talk about Zaman Cherotenu.
Yes, but the writing, the wording Zeman Cherutenu is much later. It's part of Rabbinic Hebrew, which by the time the rabbis write this blessing, this benediction, the word Zeman had already entered the Hebrew ages ago. You see, it's already in the Book of Esther. So there is no doubt that in the period of the rabbis, we already have that word as well-established Hebrew word. It's exactly like when we talk now about English, the fact that the word air comes from Greek doesn't mean it's not part of the English, right?
Okay, I just misunderstood because I would think of it as a Hebrew word.
It is a Hebrew word, like so many of the other words here. Sometimes those words came from different origins. Think about like so many words in English that are not English or not Anglo or Anglo-Saxon in origin. There are countless words that are like that. Would you say psychology is not English because it is psychologia in Greek? You can say psychology. The word derives from Greek. So the word Zaman derives possibly from Old Iranian. Doesn't make it not Hebrew. Okay. The fact that it entered the Hebrew, let's say 2,600 years ago. It's more, I entered Hebrew only 40 something years ago. So am I not Hebrew? Okay, very good. So that's Zeman. Yes, Russ?
This Hebrew phrase comes to mind, Lazman Hazed. Is that
Right.
Lazman?
Right, very good. To this appointed time. This is something that we say in every holiday. We bless the opportunity and the fact that God sustained us, okay, and kept us alive and well for this appointed time. And we say it not just in holidays. On holidays, we say it whenever we have something new. So if you have a new T-shirt, you enjoy it, you can bless that. You can make that benediction, that blessing. You have a new phone, you can bless, right? You have a new car, every time you do something new, you can bless that blessing of Shehecheyanu. Okay. Yeah, the word Zeman is important. I started with the fact that it's, so common and important. But yes, it's originally probably from Old Iranian. Now, going back to this, by the way, what I'm going to tell you now, even if you go to your local synagogue or the chance people, even people who know Hebrew very well, are aware of what I'm going to tell you, are very slim. Okay? And let's read this verse. This is very, very unusual part of the story. Almost, it's very difficult to understand. Yes, Anne.
ויאמר המלך להמן, הכסף נתון לך, והעם לעשות בו כטוב בעיניך. And the king said to Haman, the silver is yours, and the people also, to do with them as you please.
Right. You remember that the problem of Achashverosh probably has a serious financial issue. He has made so many celebrations, probably expended a lot of money on a campaign that wasn't so successful in the trying to conquer Greece, and he comes back from that, by the way. And then he has a problem with the money. And Haman knows that. So Haman says, listen, you will command that the Jews will be destroyed, and I will give you how much money, guys? Do you remember? 10,000 talents of silver. That's verse 9. Verse 10, the king is taking off his signet ring. I don't have a signet ring, just a regular ring, but it will have to do. And he gives it to Haman, the son of Hamdata. Okay? And he says to him, take the money and the people. Doesn't make a lot of sense. What about, the money? Why wouldn't he take the money? He needs the money. Who doesn't like money? The king has no problem with the Jews. It's a deal. And Haman is gonna have the Jews exterminated, which means they will not pay taxes, and the king will possibly, the coffers of the king will suffer. So he's compensating him, is offering to reimburse him, to compensate him for the killing of citizens, which makes a lot of economical sense. But the translation here, accordingly with the Hebrew, hakesef natun lach. What is natun? Natun is the passive participle. Passive kal participle. Is given, lach, to you. The lamed preposition with the second person masculine singular pronominal suffix in a posal form. The silver, the money, is given to you. That's literally what it says. So the silver is yours is not bad translation for the Hebrew here, which literally is the silver is given to you. Ve'ha'am la'asot bo katov be'enecha. But, and again, I'm not an expert on Persian grammar. It was explained to me by a professor of Persian, Iranian language, that the structure hakesef natun lach, this passive participle with the preposition to you, literally means you gave the money. The money was given by you. You gave the money. You gave the silver. So you may do with the people whatever you like. Okay? So the Hebrew here is reflecting a Persian regular way of saying you gave the silver. So now you can do with the people whatever you desire. Okay? And that makes much more reason. Okay?
That way it makes sense.
Right. Okay, it makes a lot of sense. I'm not an expert on Persian grammar, so I'm kind of just delivering what I was.
So it will come across looking opposite than what it appears to say?
Right.
Okay.
Instead of the money is given to you, but you gave the money.
You gave the money means Haman paid for
Right.
this situation to happen.
That's the context, right? In verse 9, Haman says, I will pay 10,000 talents of silver. Okay? And the phrase hakesef natun lach probably mean you paid the silver, you gave the silver. Okay? And so now you can do with the people whatever you choose. So we've talked about Persian influence, a little bit about Aramaic. Aramaic influence in Esther. Right. So we said the Aramaic was the official language of the Persian Empire. Think about the idea of running one's empire with a language that is not your own language. Okay? It's very interesting. Choosing the official language not to be your own language in the empire, just because it's already widespread, it was used before you and so forth. But it's an interesting decision nonetheless. Okay? And with Aramaic, the situation is a little bit more complicated, because even though we can certainly see more Aramaic influence in the Second Temple period, it's not that we don't have Aramaic. It's not that we don't have Aramaic influence in earlier stages of the Hebrew. You remember that last Thursday I was kind of under the weather. It was worse during the weekend, but now I'm kind of better, so I'm I was coughing now, but it's I'm on the better side of that flu or whatever that was. So we have Aramaic in the Book of Esther. We'll see one or two examples. Let's see. Yes, we talked about the Aramaic being the official language of the Persians, the Ahmani king, the Ahmanid empire, Cyrus, Darius, all of these famous guys, and how it influenced the biblical language at the time. Again, if you this let's see this example. Let's see, guys. Don't be shy. Yes. Bill.
Kadat ma la'asot b'malka Vashti al asher lo asta et ma'amar Amelech Akashverosh Bayad Asarisim. According to law, what is to be done with Queen Vashti, because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus delivered by the eunuchs.
Right. So, few interesting words here. So we've talked about that. We didn't talk about Vashti, which possibly means the most beautiful. There are different suggestions, but the word ma'amar is a word that we know the root aleph mem resh, no doubt. We know it very well from the Hebrew. Vayomer, amar, very common, very common. But the word ma'amar itself is a very rare form in Hebrew. It's very common in Aramaic. Ma'amar, especially in the sense of a command, a decree, an order, something that is said, yes, but said by the king, which makes it a decree or an order. We have other examples in the Book of Esther. And in First Temple period, we don't have that word ma'amar at all, and we don't have that word ma'amar in this sense. In First Temple period, you want to say the decree of the king, the word of the king, we have devar hamelech. What the king commanded is the word of the king in standard biblical Hebrew. 2 Samuel says, "Vayechezak devar hamelech el Yoav ve'al sarei hachayil." The word of the king, the command of the king, was strong for Yoav and the captains of the army. So ma'amar, again, Aramaic influence. Let's see the next example. Don't be shy, guys. Let's see your hands. Ron, go ahead.
Achar, see, Achar, Hadavarim, Ha Eshel, Ha'ele, is that Kish? I can't see that. Kishoch, Hamat, Hamelech, Echash, Verosh,
Achashverosh, right?
Achashverosh, Zakar, et Vashti, Va'et, oh, that's the direct object. Va'et, Asher, Ashata, Va'et, Asher, Nigatzer, Alecha. After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had subsided, he remembered Vashti, what he had done, and what had been decreed against her.
Right. So again, we have a word here that is not, it's not a root that we don't know from biblical Hebrew or from the Hebrew Bible in general. The root Gimel Zayin Reish exists. Okay. But the literal meaning of cut in that sense, in this use of the root as something that was decided as a decision, as a legal decision, as a decree, here is Aramaic in nature. Okay, very rare, even though the root exists in biblical Hebrew. So these are two examples in the Book of Esther for the okay, for the influence of the Aramaic over the Book of Esther. Let's see another word which is a little bit let's see this word, the word parasha. The modern Hebrew use of this word is twofold. First of all, parasha is the name we call the weekly portions of the Torah. So you when we talk about what was your what parasha you had in your bar mitzvah, the word that we use is parasha. Okay, as for a portion of the Torah. Right, guys? Yes. You know that word. Very good. So that's parasha. Another way in which we use the word parasha is a matter, sometimes even a scandal. Okay. A scandal in the sense of like a scheme, legal issue, moral issue, sometimes like a sequence of events that is not always with very positive connotation. And you know, we had a prime minister by the name of Ehud Olmert. And he had several legal issues like that. He ended up in jail. Okay. And there was a period in which he had so many of these issues coming up one after the other, parashot, right? So the joke went like this. Ehud Olmert goes to a synagogue, and sometimes someone comes and kisses him instead of kissing the Torah. So Ehud Olmert says, why are you kissing me instead of kissing the Torah scroll? He says, you're holier. You have more parashot than the Torah. You have, yeah. So, yeah. So that was like, but the word parasha, yeah, you have more, accusations in this case, or like, scandals, I would say maybe in that context. You have more scandals than the Torah has Torah portions. The word parasha is something that appears only here, only in the Book of Esther, not in earlier parts of the Bible. And again, it comes from the Aramaic in this context, in this sense of explanation, account, which later on would become the way we use it in post-biblical Hebrew. Let's see the verse. After having told the joke about Ehud Olmert and having to kind of give so much context that the joke, I don't know, every time you have to explain a joke and give it so much context, it ends up not being that good. But now you get the joke. Yes, so let's read this. Frank, you had your hand up before. Gary, I see your mic is open. You want to read?
All right. V'chol ma'aseh takpo ugavurato ufrashat gedulat Mordecai,
right?
Asher Gidlo Hamelech Halohim Ketuvim Al Sefer Divrei Hayamim Lemalche Madai Ufaras. And all the accomplishments of his authority and strength, and the full account of the greatness of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? Question mark.
Right. So Parashat, you can see here the full account. This comes from the idea of explanation or expounding on something. That's the context of, or the background behind the word parasha, which again later on becomes a count or a Torah portion. What was your Torah portion when you were bar mitzvahed?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't remember. It wasn't on my birthday, so.
Yeah, it was a few days ago, you say. Okay. Very good. Rabbinic Hebrew. Okay. So the Book of Esther, or late biblical Hebrew in general, is kind of a link in that chain that we've talked about. And that's the final link of what would be biblical Hebrew. And so it's not surprising to find affinity to what would be later on Rabbinic Hebrew, Mishnaic Hebrew. Okay, let's see an example. Okay, mityahadim. Oh, very interesting word. Let's see this. Go ahead, guys. If there is anyone who didn't read, oh, Anne, go ahead, please.
Okay. ובכל מדינה ומדינה ובכל עיר ועיר מקום אשר דבר המלך ודהו מגיע שמחה וששון ליהודים משתה ויום טוב ורבים מעמי הארץ מתייהדים כי נפל פחד היהודים עליהם. And in each and every province, and in each and every city, wherever the king's commandment and his decree arrived, there was gladness and joy for the Jews, a feast and a holiday. And many among the peoples of the land became Jews, for the dread of the Jews had fallen on them.
So mityahadim. What is this concept of mityahadim? This hitpael verb, whose root is yod, hey, and daled, is something that we don't have in classical Hebrew. We don't have that. It's unique, this idea of mityahadim. And it's unique for two reasons. Okay, first of all, we don't have that as a proclaimed process. We do have roots saying, your people is my people, your land is my land, your God is my God. But we don't have that recognition of ethnic like concept shifting from ethnic definition, your people, my people, to an Jewishness that can be adopted. And moreover, this shows you that it is now everyone is Jewish. Before that, you had different tribes, you had two kingdoms, right? And even though Mordecai is from the tribe of Benjamin, he is the leader of the Judeans, of the Jews. So you can see a transition that can only have happened in the conditions of the absence of a kingdom of Israel. And the Judean identity, the Jewish identity, the Judean identity is applied to all of these Israelites. Yes, Frank?
Just quickly, now is this word a hapax legomenon?
Mityahadim?
Yes.
It does not appear in any other place. Obviously the root is not unique, but the word itself is. Okay, the root is something that we do have, Yehuda, right, as a name, but as a verb, it is, and as a word, as a form, and as a verb, definitely yes. Okay? So it appears only once, only here, it's unique. Okay. Let's talk quickly about other things. We're not gonna see everything. So we have some morphological changes that reflect Second Temple period, such as the ut ending at the end of words to mark abstract nouns. And we have some syntactic changes, which we're not going to discuss, which also reflect the Second Temple period Hebrew. And what we did today is talking about the Book of Esther and also talking about late biblical Hebrew and trying to kind of work everything together a little bit, talking about Persian background of the Book of Esther, talking about all kinds of phenomena that came across by your questions during the reading of these verses. As always, it has been an absolute pleasure. Have a Freilichen Purim. Have a happy Purim, everybody. Okay. Bring the joy of Purim to the people around you. For us Jews, the necessity to protect ourselves in every generation and generation is in this generation more obvious than in many other generations, but really it's not news. It's something that we always have. So we'll read this and we'll remember what happened in the past and what is still occurring today, these days, nowadays. And thank you again, guys, for everything you do, everyone here that supports and that helps, and that's something so significant. Thank you, guys.
You're
Chag
welcome.
Sameach.
Chag Sameach, Purim
Baruch
Sameach,
Hashem.
Purim.
Amen.
Purim Sameach, Freilichen Purim,
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. It's beautiful to see you, and it's, you know, I love each and every one of you, and have a happy Purim from the bottom of my heart and from all of my family. I apologize that I don't have anything to make a toast, because Purim is a celebration that involves a lot of wine. But if you're in Israel tomorrow evening, that's a different story.
You have Haman Toshin?
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I try to avoid too many of these, but yeah, sure. Yeah.
You say that they tried to kill us. They failed. Let's see.
Let's see. Yeah, that's the gist of it. Right. Bye-bye, guys.
Do you have time for a mini question?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Monica.
Thank you. So, Aramaic was the lingua franca of the Persians, and Aramaic and some Aramaic words you mentioned had come from the Assyrian. Bless you.
Yes, Aramaic has been coexisting, living side by side with the Hebrew for the past 3,000 years.
3,000 years.
Yeah.
And because of the Assyrian.
Maybe even more. I'm just saying what is the written evidence, okay? Maybe spoken even longer alongside the Hebrew. Because gradually it became more common as the lingua franca of the region, it was adopted as the official language of the Persian Empire, even though the Persians had a language that wasn't even Semitic. Okay? So that's what I said. Now, that makes the Aramaic more influential, but less distinctive in the sense that you see Aramaic influence and it's more difficult to ascertain that this influence has to do with late Aramaic influence, because it was around the Hebrew even before.
And you said because of the Assyrians, they got influenced by Latin, because this is in the period where Latin and Rome existed. And
No.
That's the part that confused
That's
me.
much later. Okay, much later.
But the word that
Assyrian, I talk about the 8th century before the Common Era.
yes. You're talking of longer before.
Right. Yeah, the Hellenistic influence starts with the 4th century Alexander the Great, around 333-32 before the Common Era. And the Romans, that's even the 1st century before the Common Era, with Pompey conquering Judah in 63 before the Common Era. So I'm talking about much earlier.
So the word that,
The
came
word
to Latin from.
It didn't come to Latin. Latin is also an Indo-European language.
Yes.
It comes from the same origins as in Persian.
Okay, so that's what confused me. Thank you.
We call that
I'm sorry, Joy. Yes.
Okay.
Proto-European root. Proto-Indo-European.
Proto-Indo-European, or right. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
תודה רבה ופורים שמח.